Hi there everyone, Lars here with a writer's analysis and a bit of a rant brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And the Disney Plus series, Obi-Wan Kenobi, recently wrapped up, bringing with it the most anticipated rematch of the century, Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader. And look, I know that everyone has got their own opinion of the show and of its different fights. I'm just going to say, it really didn't do it for me. And I'm not here necessarily to convince anyone that the show was bad, because if you enjoyed it, awesome, you enjoyed it, and I'm really happy that you did. Really, I am. But I am going to argue that the lightsaber duels between Obi-Wan and Vader, both of them, were more lousy than the actual lightsaber fight, the real rematch between Obi-Wan and Vader in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. And I am going to break that down right here, right now. So when it comes to analyzing any good fight, the two things that we need to know are these. Number one, why is this fight happening? And number two, what are the consequences of this particular fight? So I'm actually going to have to do this now for 3 different fights right here. The first rematch between Obi-Wan and Vader, which is in Episode 3 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then the second rematch, which is in Episode 6 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then the third rematch, which is in Star Wars A New Hope. And what I hope to show is this, that the build-up to the fight between Obi-Wan and Vader in A New Hope is far more solid in its setup and far better in its payoff than the other two are altogether. So, let me explain. In the build-up to the first rematch between Obi-Wan and Vader, which is on a planet that I can't even remember its name because all I can remember is that they shot it in a rock quarry somewhere in California. So we're going to call this Planet Destitute California. California with a drought. That one planet that we only remember because we got to see Anakin's ghost or the memory of Anakin hanging out by a cliff. What happens right here is, this is nuts right here. Here's the setup. Here's why this fight even happens. So we have Reva, who is hunting down Jedi, and she, for whatever reason, has decided that the big prize is Obi-Wan Kenobi, for whom there's really no confirmation if he's alive or dead. For all she knows, she's hunting a ghost, but she's put a big plan into motion to flush out Kenobi. Somehow. And in the process of that, Princess Leia is kidnapped from her homeworld, and Bail Organa does the dumbest thing and tells Obi-Wan that he should find Leia, rather than using his powers as basically a king and one of the most powerful and most beloved senators in the Senate with all of his vast resources to basically hire an army and come down on whoever has just stolen his daughter. He has that ability, why go to Obi-Wan? This is already the beginning of basically a lot of contrivances and really stupid moments. So Obi-Wan goes to get Leia. And honestly, it's kind of neat going then to a downgraded cyberpunk world or downgraded Blade Runner world to go get Princess Leia from a bunch of drug dealers. Obi-Wan grabs her, and I've already brought this up in a rant of just how the characters start becoming conveniently stupid. And that's another problem. So we have a bit of a contrivance, which leads to characters suddenly becoming conveniently stupid, which, okay, that's what's going on. Obi-Wan saves Leia, but rather than take her directly back to Alderaan, which he has the ability to do, no, we go to California to meet up with rebels, who will then help Obi-Wan meet up with other rebels, who will eventually get Leia to Alderaan. What? And this, of course, then gives Reva plenty of time to then inform Lord Vader that the hunt for Obi-Wan is on, and Vader comes for Obi-Wan. He comes on over to planet California, and there he comes to confront Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan, who has cut himself off from the Force due to PTSD, and also because he doesn't want to be discovered by the Inquisitors or by the Empire, he's on the struggle bus right here. He's definitely not up to par with a Sith Lord who has been actively hunting and killing for the past decade. So it makes sense then that Obi-Wan would be kind of on the back foot with this particular set of circumstances right here. Whether you agree with them or not, that's what the writers wrote, so we're going with it. And oh boy, this fight's nuts right here. It is elongated and ballooned far beyond what it really should be. In fact, actually, this fight, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, it goes on longer than the actual fight between Vader and Obi-Wan in Star Wars A New Hope. You can actually clock it. It goes on for about 1 minute and 50 seconds at most, with a lot of running around and a little bit of burning. And Obi-Wan just gets flattened. He looks like an absolute noob in all of this, which is kind of sad considering that this is the guy who went toe-to-toe with Anakin at the height of their powers, had one of the most ridiculous duels in all of Star Wars. That's kind of the level of what everyone expected their fight to be like, and it ends with Obi-Wan losing and having to be rescued by a loader droid and a rebel. So, well, sorry, Obi-Wan, that kind of sucks. What does this now mean? Well, it now means that Obi-Wan has lost track of Leia. Leia has been captured by Reva, and now this means that Obi-Wan must work with the rebels to go to the Inquisitor's palace and thereby rescue Leia, prolonging the story even more and setting up another conflict between him and Vader. The thing is as far as the longer consequences of this particular fight goes, really, it's hard to tell what this actually does for Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan continues to struggle with himself as far as his relationship with Anakin, and really it's the hope of saving Leia that helps him to snap out of his funk. It's not actually the fight with Vader himself. Really, this fight means more for Vader because this fuels his desire for revenge, and now he's willing to do anything to take on Obi-Wan. And this is shown in various flashbacks and whatnot to show that Anakin, when he thinks he can go in for the kill, becomes reckless and becomes stupid, which then sets up the next confrontation between Obi-Wan and Vader. Now then, we get to the second rematch, which is on planet Avatar, the Last Airbender, Aang versus Fire Lord Ozai. Because we have this blasted moon with a bunch of rock pillars that make no sense that they're there, but there they are. Who knows what this place is? Honestly, who knows where most of these worlds are or what they are within this show? But Obi-Wan and Vader are going to square off again here. So what's led them to this point? Well, after busting Leia out of the Inquisitor Palace, Obi-Wan retreats with Leia back to the rebel hideout with the Empire in hot pursuit. And Reva is there. She attempts to catch Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan gives himself up, but then again, in the grand calculus of whatever this Inquisitor is going for, things just aren't going according to plan, when really they are. And her attempt to get revenge on Vader goes awry as Vader skewers her. And, oh boy, why do people keep coming back from lightsaber wounds that they're not supposed to come back from? In any case, Vader is basically distracted from really catching Obi-Wan as Obi-Wan and the rebels take off and flee. And so now he's got to chase him down. And again, this is where convenience and conveniently stupid moments all kick in. Why does Reva take this opportunity now to try and kill Vader when she's had other opportunities before? You think that trying to attack Vader from behind with an ignited lightsaber right when the guy is at his most angry is the best idea? Really? This was done all to give Obi-Wan a chance to escape. We then have the Imperial Star Destroyer unable to hit anything. This is not according to any sort of canon. It's like they've taken the joke that stormtroopers can't hit the broadside of a barn, and now they've applied it to massive battleships. That goes against all forms of canon. The Imperial Star Destroyers are forces to be reckoned with. The rebels fear them. It takes multiple ships to take one down, and they are very, very accurate and very, very deadly. So you don't go up against this, and Vader has always the best ship and always the best crew at his direct disposal. Why are they missing this little ship? Well, as they're flying around, doop-a-doop-a-doop, not getting hit, Obi-Wan's like, I will buy you all time. I will fly off to the scene where the ending of Avatar: The Last Airbender takes place, the last battle. I'm gonna fly on over there to give you all a chance to escape. And he does. He gets into a little escape pod and flies off. Vader senses him, and rather than Vader hunting down Obi-Wan just by himself, he then veers the entire Imperial cruiser right after Obi-Wan. Again, this kind of makes a little bit of sense, given that the show wants to let us know that Anakin is impetuous, that he can make dumb decisions when he thinks he's able to go in for the kill. But this is exceedingly dumb, especially for Vader, who has shown in every other instance that he's always multiple steps ahead. I mean, he was well ahead of Reva and her plan for revenge. He knew it was coming for years and had planned accordingly. So, how is it then that he's messing up so bad here? Well, it's because we need to have this epic fight. Now then, I will say this. This fight was indeed epic, and I can absolutely see why a lot of people would be really, really happy in seeing this right here, because we've already gotten to see Vader tear a ship apart with the Force, showing just how much of a badass he is. And we've already seen Obi-Wan reconnect with the Force, and they've ripped off their own video games and their own shows to basically give Obi-Wan moments that he never would have had, whatever. But basically both of them are at the height of their powers now, again with the Force. They are ready to fight each other. This is the battle that will determine it all. Who is going to win? Who will live? And who will die? That's basically what this has been set up as. Obi-Wan now faces Vader full of confidence and with his faith restored in the Force. He's ready to fight Vader, and we get some real flashiness here, but the swordplay is kind of all over the place. If you pay attention, there's a couple of parts where they're just swinging into the air, purposefully missing each other. That's kind of bad. And it's just them, once again, it's Obi-Wan kind of running around using the topography, using the geography, which is really good. You want to use your setting to help enhance a fight, and that's definitely what's done here. I'm going to give this fight full marks for utilizing the setting within the fight, but there's not a whole lot of lightsaber crossing to actually look really, really cool. Eventually, Vader breaks the floor, creates a cavern, and just collapses a whole bunch of stones on top of Obi-Wan, and doesn't bother checking to see if the guy is dead. Turns his back, Obi-Wan focuses on the Force, he focuses on his duty to Leia, rockets back on up, turns the rebel basically into a Gatling gun, pummels Vader, weakening him, and then slash across his back, and then slash through the helmet, which should have killed Vader, but doesn't, exposes Anakin within. And then Vader says, I killed Anakin. And Obi-Wan's like, then my friend is truly dead. And walks off! Oh my gosh. Wasn't that the setting was all set up for a fight to the death. Obi-Wan has clearly won. And he walks away. And by doing this, the long-term consequences of this particular decision are these. Because Obi-Wan has done this, Vader is now free to live and to kill yet again. This allows Vader to fulfill the Emperor's wishes, which will lead to the deaths of countless millions of people, not just on Alderaan, but across the entire galaxy. Obi-Wan, you're a Jedi Knight dedicated to the peace and stability of the galaxy. And you just allowed its greatest agent of chaos and murder, besides the Emperor, to run loose. Wow! This is a pretty bad decision right here. And this is supposed to be a moment that solidifies something that was already told to us in Episode 3, that Anakin Skywalker was gone, consumed by Darth Vader. And it's as though Obi-Wan never believed this, and will now only believe it when he hears it from the mouth of Anakin himself, which again is counterproductive because we already got that at the end of Episode 3 when Obi-Wan fights Anakin, and Anakin clearly is going for the kill, disowning him as a friend, as a mentor, as a father figure, as a brother, as everything that Anakin wished he could have in his life other than Padme. Obi-Wan is his closest friend, and he completely disowned him in their final fight. And we can see as the fight goes on, he just becomes more deranged, he becomes more like Vader, and in that moment, Obi-Wan should have definitely seen that As Yoda said, Anakin has been consumed by Darth Vader, which then creates that really great line in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, that from a certain point of view, Vader killed Anakin. And that what makes that then so brilliant is that Luke refuses to accept that point of view and says, no, my father's still in there and I'm going to rescue him. So Episode 3 to Episode 6, in terms of the Star Wars movies, we get a really great through thread. In this show, it feels as though they weren't paying attention to the end of Episode 3. And really what that means then is that this fight, even though it looked really flashy and cool, it's almost inconsequential because we've already been here. And in fact, if anything, it makes Obi-Wan look almost like a villain, and it makes him look incompetent. At the end of Episode 3, we could understand Obi-Wan walking away because Anakin is burning to death right next to a river of lava. As far as Obi-Wan's concerned, he's going to die. And Obi-Wan, we know, can't bring himself to kill his brother, Anakin. So he will let the elements do the job for him, which is not great in hindsight, but it makes sense right there for Episode 3. At this point, though, in the show of Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan should not have made a mistake like that. And it just means that in terms of consequences, this makes Vader actually suddenly look really weak, even though we've just seen him do all these incredible things with the Force. How did he get beaten so easily with a Gatling gun of rocks? And it makes Obi-Wan look incompetent despite his awesomeness with the Force. And this is a real problem right here. Sometimes it's very, very possible to take OP characters, have them fight in a really great duel that is exciting, it pulls people in, but when you take a step back from it and you look at the consequences of the fight, you're like, why did this fight even happen? And you then realize that these OP characters look incompetent in retrospect. And you never want that to happen. If you're going to have a fight between OP characters, it should be fulfilling. It should be something that people come back to and are like, I've just discovered a whole new layer to this fight. It's incredible. I love this clash of titans. But to be all honest, I don't feel that at all with this fight. I know some people will, and it's going to be very fascinating to see where the fan base for Star Wars is 5 years from now when we look back here at Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now then, I have broken things down. I know I've probably been a little bit snarky with both of these duels. It's because it's very hard for me to take it seriously. You guys know where my bias is. But let me be really honest with you and say, when you watch Star Wars A New Hope, and you watch Vader versus Obi-Wan in this movie, it still holds immense gravitas to it, even though it's decades old. It's almost 50 years old, and yet this scene is so poignant. This fight, fought with experimental technology on the part of the filmmakers, still resonates. It's definitely nowhere near as flashy as the other fights are, yet it is almost technically perfect, with a brilliant setup and far-reaching consequences. That is why I would argue that the duel between Vader and Obi-Wan in Star Wars A New Hope is actually superior to what we've seen here in the show Obi-Wan Kenobi. And no, it's not because I despise the show generally, but as I'm going to show you, in matters of technicality and storytelling, it is indeed superior. So, let's have a look at the storytelling. Remember, two things that we need to know for every fight. Why did it happen, and what are the consequences? Why has this fight happened? Well, it goes to the very first scene of Star Wars A New Hope, with Vader chasing down Princess Leia's ship and capturing it. He has captured Leia as he's looking for the Death Star plans. Because Vader is about to catch her, Leia sends out her two droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO, with the stolen plans for the weakness to the Empire's Death Star, the ultimate weapon in the universe that will allow them to destroy any planet instantly. With this, they will be able to control the galaxy indefinitely. So it's very, very important that the rebels find out how to destroy this thing. So the droids escape and they land on the desert planet of Tatooine, where, yeah, we could argue through contrivances, they end up at the Lars farm. Hey, Lars, that's my name. At the farm of Uncle Owen Lars and Aunt Beru Lars. With Luke Skywalker, obviously, not a Lars. So, they end up on the farm where they meet Luke, who wishes to go on and be a hero, even though when he's actually first given the chance, he decides he's going to stay at the farm. Luke is a very interesting character, but in any case, through some decisions made by R2-D2, so there's consequences to decisions. It's not just simply weird contrivances. R2-D2 is trying to find Obi-Wan Kenobi, which leads Luke and C-3PO into confrontation with the Tusken Raiders. They're defeated, Luke is going to get killed, but then Obi-Wan shows up on the scene and saves Luke. Obi-Wan hears the message from Princess Leia and realizes what he has on his hands. He's also been watching Luke all this time, waiting for a moment to train Luke in the ways of the Force, and he offers that to Luke. Through all these different circumstances that are happening there within the movie, Luke and Obi-Wan go on an adventure with Han Solo and Chewbacca and the droids to go and deliver the Death Star plans to Alderaan, which is destroyed by Lord Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin as they are interrogating Princess Leia to get her to reveal the base for the Rebel Alliance as they seek to destroy it and wipe out the rebellion in one swift stroke. And so consequences of those choices are being made by both heroes and villains on different sides of the galaxy, leading to our heroes witlessly going to Alderaan, finding that it doesn't exist anymore, and getting caught in a tractor beam and pulled aboard the Death Star. Obi-Wan, realizing what's really going on here, he senses Vader, and he senses a trap, but he also senses a brilliant opportunity. He can help save the day, and he might even be able to deliver a killing stroke to the Empire, whether it be killing Darth Vader in this moment in the Death Star, or providing motivation to Luke Skywalker. Obi-Wan takes the dangerous road, and he offers to go and shut down the tractor beam in order to release the Millennium Falcon. Meanwhile, Luke and Han stage a rescue mission for Princess Leia, which goes through, and it's awesome. Really, man, Star Wars A New Hope is just so great. It goes from story beat to story beat so well. Character motivations and choices make sense. There's no one acting conveniently stupid at all within this story. There are definitely stupid decisions made, but they're made within the parameters of well-established characters. Now then, as Obi-Wan has shut down the tractor beam, he goes to find Vader. And sure enough, he finds Vader waiting for him, who has sensed his master and realizes escape is not Obi-Wan's plan. Obi-Wan intends to confront me, whether it be to kill me or something else. Vader is pretty certain that's to kill him, but Obi-Wan is playing a much longer game. He's going to win no matter what. So Obi-Wan and Vader confront each other, and they duel. And this duel, yes, it is definitely not flashy at all. Anyone can be forgiven for being somewhat bored with this fight, unless you know your sword play. And that's one of the neat things with this right here. If you go over to the channel Shadiversity, Shad loves to make a big stick about how in Hollywood films, whenever there's swordplay, people love to get stuck in the bind, which means that the swords cross, and I'm struggling against your sword as hard as I can, rather than angling their sword or sidestepping or doing something else in order to keep the swordplay going and force an exposure, force an opening, strike that opening, and kill your opponent. Here within this fight, Vader and Obi-Wan are actually doing proper swordplay and fencing. As their weapons clash, yeah, there's a lot and they're forcing each other, but they're constantly maneuvering their lightsabers to try to force the other one to give them an opening so that way they can thrust and kill. We actually see both Vader and Obi-Wan go for various thrusts, and then the other quickly parries and then tries to attack, and the other one's then forced to parry as well. It's very quick, very clipped swordplay, which if you watch people fencing, there's no real grand, I'm going to swing my sword in a massive arc, yarg. But instead, it's very quick, very direct. You conserve your energy as you try to force your opponent to give you an opening, and then you strike. That is what we get in this fight. It's very technical. It's very measured, and it makes a lot of sense. Well, as the heroes escape from the trash compactor and make their way back to the Millennium Falcon, they make their way for the ship as all of the stormtroopers are distracted by this amazing show of lightsaber prowess. This is probably something they've never seen before. And so the heroes take advantage of this. Obi-Wan looks and he sees that Luke is right there. If he gives away Luke in this moment, Vader might just catch Luke. And so Obi-Wan, at this point, he knows he can't kill Vader right away. They are pretty evenly matched. And so Obi-Wan, realizing he can't kill Vader right away, and realizing that if this fight is prolonged for any certain degree, Vader will discover Luke and all could be lost in that moment. Because Luke and Leia are both there. It could mean the end of the rebellion. It could mean the end of the good side of the Force. So Obi-Wan lifts his lightsaber and allows Vader to strike him. When this happens, Obi-Wan dies and vanishes. This moment right here galvanizes Luke, brings the raging hero out of him, and puts Luke on the warpath to confront Vader. Also, it allows Obi-Wan to become one with the Force and act as a constant guide to Luke. This will play out through the rest of Episode 4 as Obi-Wan guides Luke and helps him to build his faith and confidence in the Force and do what is necessary to destroy the Death Star and save the Rebel Alliance. Then, Obi-Wan uses his guidance to lead Luke to Yoda, and through the tutelage of both Obi-Wan and Yoda, Luke becomes a full Jedi Knight and confronts his father. He will lose to his father at the end of Episode 5, learning that he is Vader's son, which then puts him on a whole new collision course to now redeem his father by the end of Episode 6, help to defeat the Empire, and redeem the Force. So, those are the long-reaching consequences of this duel right here. This duel that a lot of people kind of scoff at because it's not as flashy as all the others, ends up being one of the most important and a very character-driven fight as well between Obi-Wan and Vader. And there's so much meaning in it. On top of that, even though it's not flashy, it's technically very well executed. Even though the technology to make the lightsabers in the 1970s really was cheap and there's some jump cuts there and everything like that, yeah, it's not beautiful to watch, but it is very, very well put together. And not just for the technology that they had at the time, no, it's actually a very good fight in terms of choreography, in terms of its setup, how did we get to this fight, and its long-term consequences, why this fight matters. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at these different fights, you might be able to argue that the two different rematches between Obi-Wan and Vader in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series are all about putting Obi-Wan and Vader onto their respective paths, in which they will come to clash again in Star Wars A New Hope. And that is an argument that definitely holds some water. The thing is that Revenge of the Sith already did that. So these fights are really rather redundant. And there's a lot of inconsistencies to them. They come into being because of conveniently stupid moments, and their consequences feel kind of flattened by the fact that you look back, especially after the second duel, and you're like, both of these guys are somewhat incompetent. But by the end of the duel in Star Wars A New Hope, you don't get that feeling at all. You understand Vader's rage and why this fight means so much to him. You understand why Obi-Wan is willing to sacrifice himself, and we get to see the long-term consequences of their choices, leading all the way up to the fantastic climax and redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi. Now then, please feel free to disagree with me down in the comments below. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are probably not too happy with me for going on this long, some seemingly pedantic rant and analysis of these fights right here, but I felt that it was necessary to show that even really cool flashy fights might not hold the substance that you think. And that's something that we as writers definitely need to hold in remembrance, especially those of you who wish to write really action-packed stories. Again, as someone who writes a lot of action-packed moments, I write massive battles for my stories and some really high-stake personal duels and really great moments of just like sheer magic and whatnot. What matters is how we got to that fight and what are its consequences. Why does this fight matter? And you can have a really good fun fight that really is inconsequential in the long run. That's totally fine. But if you're going to bring your OP characters, your real heavy hitters, your main characters, and you're going to bring them together to fight, you want to make sure that you've really set up that fight well and logically, that it fits within the established characters that we have, and that it then has good long-term consequences that drive the survivors of that fight towards their next adventure, either breaking their resolve, hardening their resolve, helping them to learn something about their general world, about the plot, about themselves, something that keeps the audience engaged and gives that fight, that really cool moment, meaning. Because if you can do that, if you can set it up well, and if you can give that fight meaning, that fight will be far more memorable in the long run, which is again why I'm very interested to see where the fan base stands 5 years later. Maybe I should set my clock or something, so that way I can come back 5 years from now, check out my video, and see what I think about these fights after 5 years' time, where I can reflect, see what I've learned, see what else comes out. And yeah, I think that's really something that a lot of people who do analyses should do. Always be open-minded and willing to learn, especially with the passage of time. But for now, this has been my analysis of the 3 rematch fights between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. Now, I know that I've already gone on pretty long right here, but you know what? I might as well offer up my opinion on the state of Star Wars right here, because I see a lot of this everywhere. As someone who actually wanted to go into film production as a career back when I was in high school, and I changed my career path right as I got into college, but I always have loved film. I've always loved cartoons. I really love that industry. And even though I'm not a part of it, even though it's not my career now, I like to keep abreast with what's going on. And as I've watched Star Wars, I've seen the fan base fracture. I've seen the overall quality denigrate, and it's been really, really interesting to watch. Let me just say that not just as someone who consumes Star Wars, but as someone who has a connection with Star Wars, it's been interesting. It's been disheartening, and in some cases it's been heartening. Let me just say this. Star Wars is a massive inspiration to myself. Some of my characters, and in fact, actually the magical swords that are used by some characters in The Legend of the Ten Lords are absolutely based on lightsabers, 100%. They don't quite act like lightsabers, but they're lightsaber adjacent. And one of the characters, the way that he dresses, I based that off of the question I had long ago, what if a character was like Obi-Wan but evil? And yeah, that's how you get Bob the Virus. With the way he looks, the way he acts, and everything like that is based on how I envisioned Star Wars and what I took away from Star Wars. But not only that, Star Wars has been a way of connecting with a lot of people in my life. My dad is a huge Trekkie. This guy can remember almost everything about the original Star Trek series. But I never really got that much into Star Trek. And so because my dad likes nerdy things, I like nerdy things, he introduced me to Star Wars as a young kid. And he sat patiently with me through all the different movies. He listened to all of my nagging questions as a little kid, and he patiently explained everything that he could. And that has created so many fond memories between me and my dad while I was growing up. And it's something that's still that's still a bond for us. I actually, while doing my research for this long video right here, I sat down with my dad, and we went over the different fights, we talked about them, and it was really, really great, because once again, that goes back to my childhood right here, and here you have me and my dad discussing something that was a real bonding moment for us as I was growing up. And so Star Wars is always going to be precious to me, no matter what, just for that alone. But Star Wars was also a way for me to connect with my brother-in-law. Star Wars has been a way for me to connect with people who were some of my good friends growing up. Star Wars has also been a way for me to connect with strangers and form great relationships with people, well, that I might not otherwise have had the chance to really forge that bond with them. Star Wars has been a matter of contemplating faith and philosophy. Star Wars has been something fun to watch. It's really, really great. Star Wars is something special. And I think for every fan of Star Wars out there, there's something special about this long-lived series that really brings them to the table and is like, this is Star Wars for me. And because that is the case, because there are so many millions of people who have a connection to Star Wars, we all want to see more of it. This is where things have really started to fall apart. Ever since Disney bought the rights to Star Wars, they treated Star Wars like any product that can be mass-produced. And it went from a cultural phenomena to a product. And it's a product that we have all consumed. Now then, the problem with that is this, is that once you take something that was a story, a myth, a legend, a personal experience, and you change it to a thing that is meant to be bought. And now then, make no mistake, George Lucas was definitely making money. His eyes were full of dollar bill signs as he was making these movies. So I'm not saying that George Lucas wasn't out to make money. But by making Star Wars just simply monetary and no longer a myth and an experience, by doing that, we now have a fracturing of the fan base. We now get to see those who are basically the consumers, those who just want Star Wars. It doesn't matter what it's like. They just want Star Wars. You then have the people who want to preserve the myth of what Star Wars is, and then you have a lot of people in the middle who are seeking to find what they like best out of Star Wars and to kind of just disregard what they don't. What this has now led to is it's now led to kind of a hyper sped up version of what happened to myths like Hercules or Heracles back in ancient Greece. Everyone loved Hercules. Everyone wanted a piece of Hercules. Everyone wanted to be part of that myth. And over the process of hundreds of years, you have multiple additions made to the myth. Almost every single city-state had its own version of what Hercules did there, and just all these amazing stories. And over time, these stories basically separated people, as people are like, well, this is my Hercules versus your Hercules. My Hercules was awesome because he stopped above a volcano. Well, my Hercules is awesome because he built my city. Well, you know what? My Hercules is awesome because in my backyard, he went to hell and back again. Stuff like that. And that's kind of what's happening right here. We have people arguing, well, this is my Star Wars. No, this is my Star Wars. Well, this is my Star Wars. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the long run, because eventually we'll get to a point where Disney isn't producing Star Wars anymore. And the product will have fallen out of vogue, and we're just going to move on. When that happens, there'll be a time where people, generations from now, are going to look back. They're going to look back at Star Wars, and they're going to try to compile the myth of what Star Wars is. One of the things, though, is that Disney has created a lot of inconsistencies within the lore. Sorry, but they are. Because there's a lot of things that you're going to look at, especially, for instance, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Why is this here? What did this create? What kind of characters did it give? Why are these character arcs never resolved? What questions were never resolved? Quite a few. So do we consider this canon or not? And then, if you believe the rumors that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are trying to erase the sequel series due to The Mandalorian, well, which timeline then do we run with? The sequel trilogy or The Mandalorian? Or do we just discount The Mandalorian altogether? This is going to lead to some really, really interesting debates. And effectively, what's going to happen is that people other than ourselves and other than Disney or George Lucas will determine the ultimate fate and myth status of Star Wars. Star Wars as we know it is kind of going out the window. By being denigrated into a product, it has become something that we now argue over rather than bond over, which is really sad to see. I can see the fan base getting fractured, and that's highly disappointing. It's also highly disappointing that's just been downgraded to product, because as such, product comes and goes. Some product is great, some product is not. And Star Wars was always meant to be an experience. And that whole connection, that culture that came with Star Wars is slowly vanishing as we proceed down this path. And what people consider to be canon is changing. This will lead to a future where people will argue about what really is canon within Star Wars. And eventually there will be some great academic fights over it, and then we will then have the newly organized myth of Star Wars. And there will be all these kinds of books written about it based off of what George Lucas said, what Kathleen Kennedy said, what Disney said, what all these different articles said, what the fans said, and will be treated as relics of a bygone era. It's really interesting to realize that that's kind of what is happening right here, getting a little bit meta. But it's also kind of sad because something that could have been so uniform, so awesome, is going through this right here. Now then, there's going to be many, many different opinions on what is happening with Star Wars. For myself, what I feel is that this is just a symptom of a greater problem, where why does it matter that we try to better ourselves as writers? That is what Camille's Harem is all about. It's all about helping any writer out there. We especially reach out to novice writers. But why do we do this? It is to help out any author who wishes to improve his or her craft and become better and create the best story that you can. Why? Because you need your stories. Your stories need you, and the world needs your stories. As such, we should always strive to be our best. What we see here with the current state of Star Wars is that it's just one of many victims of where good writing is falling by the wayside, where just people are quickly cranking out story as if it were product, and they're not treating stories as the experiences that they should be. They're not really seeking to bond with their audience, nor are they seeking to do the best by all their characters. You can tell what happens if you don't treat a character right. As Nathan always likes to say, a story lives or dies by its characters. And if you're not treating your characters right, if you're not treating your story right, the audience will recognize that. And over time, your story will fall apart, and people won't want to read it or watch it or listen to it anymore. And that's such a shame because, again, the world needs your stories. As I look on out at the industry, not just simply Hollywood, but just storytelling in general, it feels like we're definitely taking a few steps back. And to wax a little eloquent right here with an idea that I definitely want to get back to when I finally tear into the rings of power, it's this, that good storytelling and great stories are like fantastic chocolates. There's all kinds of chocolates that you can go and buy. And you know what? It's nice to get the cheap chocolate every now and then. I like good cheap chocolate. Hershey's is not the best chocolate out there, but by golly, Hershey's is tasty sometimes. S'mores are delicious. I want to get myself some Hershey's. Snickers, I love Snickers bars. Are they the best candy bar out there? I love them, but they're probably not the best. Crickets or cockroaches in there much? Yee. So, it's absolutely fine to enjoy lesser quality chocolate. And if you're constantly eating fine chocolate all the time, like great Swiss and Belgian chocolate, so tasty, you know what? You're really limiting yourself to what you can enjoy. And when you're always just eating the best, it eventually becomes commonplace. So you gotta balance out your diet of chocolates. You gotta try out all different kinds of chocolate, because all kinds of chocolate bring its own experiences. But what's happening is this, is that the industry of storytelling, from Hollywood to books to magazines and the likes, what's happening is this, is that it's becoming harder and harder to find good quality chocolate. And instead, we're just being inundated with just so-so chocolate. Not even necessarily bad chocolate. There's definitely some bad chocolate, but we're just being inundated with so-so chocolate. People want chocolate. And eventually, people will just accept the so-so chocolates. And what a life that is. Remember, if you just always ate the best chocolate, you're depriving yourself of experience. And if you're just always eating the so-so chocolate, it's the exact same thing. We need variety. And honestly, for yourself, as the chocolate maker, as the storyteller in this scenario, you want to do your best to create the best chocolate, the best story that you can. Even if when you're finally done with it, it falls into the so-so ranking, the Snickers bars and Hershey's of the world, if you did your best, and you know you did your best, you can move on knowing that you're in the right, that you did what you wanted to do, and you did your best. And that's rewarding in of itself. And there'll be plenty of people who will love what you have made. But if you think that you're making great Swiss chocolate and what you've managed to crank out is a half-baked Hershey's bar, and you sell it for $500 saying, "This is perfect," no, that sucks. That's bad. And that's what we see happening all over the place. And I'm sick and tired of being force-fed bad or so-so chocolate and being told that this is the good quality stuff. If I want a Hershey's bar, I'm going to get myself a Hershey's bar. If I want a Snickers bar, I'm going to get a Snickers bar. But if I'm going to get some good, sweet Kinder Choco, it better be some good Kinder Choco. And that's what I want. I want Star Wars to again have high quality storytelling. If you just, The Mandalorian is not necessarily high quality storytelling, nor is Kenobi. And I'm fine if you have stories like that. That's totally fine. But please bring back the good quality stories. Please bring that back, because that's what the world needs. We need those kinds of stories. So, I know I've waxed eloquent, I've waxed pedantic. This has definitely gone far beyond just simply analyzing the 3 rematch fights between Vader and Obi-Wan. Like I said, this is a bit of a rant and not just an analysis in and of itself. And I haven't necessarily ranted all that much. Rather, I've just kind of done my best to give my opinion as diplomatically as I possibly could. Some people will definitely take this as an absolute attack against themselves. That's definitely not what this was meant to be, but rather just an honest analysis of these fights, of the situation, especially as I see it, and see what we can possibly learn from this. So, for all you novice writers out there, especially to those of you who have watched the end to this video, thank you for joining me on this particular part of our journey, this Star Wars expedition on this journey that we call writing. It really means a lot to me, just like Star Wars means a lot to me. So I honestly do thank you for spending your time here with us at Camille's Harem. If you're looking for more solid writing advice, please check out our other videos here on our YouTube channel. You can also head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have writing exercises for all you authors out there over at our Pinterest page, and we would love for you to join our ever-growing community of authors. Links for all of that and more are down in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.